A woman attends a high society gala with her husband, expecting support and pride. Instead, she becomes the target of cruel laughter from her husband and his powerful boss. But what they don't know is, she holds a secret that could shake their careers. One whispered sentence to the CEO turns the tables dramatically, leaving the entire hall in stunned silence. The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, every inch of it breathing wealth and status. Laughter floated through the air like music. Clinking glasses marked conversations between power players, and elegant dresses brushed against polished marble floors. As she stepped into the room beside her husband, she could feel eyes turning toward them. He walked proudly, arm locked with hers, but there was something about his smile tonight that didn't feel like the usual warm charm. It was sharper, almost rehearsed. She had spent hours preparing for this gala. Every strand of her hair was perfectly set, her gown was tailored to perfection, and she carried herself with a quiet elegance that always turned heads without needing to try. But the moment they entered, she noticed how his boss, a heavy-set man with a booming voice and an air of authority, leaned toward her husband with a smirk. They whispered something, then both laughed. It was small, almost invisible to anyone else, but she caught it. Her stomach tightened. Something was off. They moved through the crowd, greeting executives, smiling for photos. She held her composure like a practiced performer, but her husband's behavior grew increasingly uncomfortable. He wasn't affectionate like before. Instead, he paraded her around like some ornament, showing her off in front of colleagues, yet mocking her behind her back with snide comments whispered to his boss. At first, she ignored it, convincing herself she was imagining things. But then, the moment arrived. On the stage, as the host made announcements, her husband and his boss stood beside her, laughing at something on a phone. The boss turned to her and, loud enough for a few nearby guests to hear, said, "You clean up well tonight. Didn't think you had it in you." His tone dripped with condescension. Her husband burst out laughing. The laughter wasn't light, it was cruel. It sliced through her like glass. Heads turned. A couple nearby exchanged awkward glances. She forced a polite smile, but inside, something snapped. Her husband, the man who once defended her fiercely, was now laughing at her in public, in front of people who respected him. She stood there, humiliated, surrounded by power players who were pretending not to stare but were absolutely watching. And then, as if the humiliation wasn't enough, the boss raised his glass and said, "You should thank him. He's the reason you're even standing in this room." More laughter. Her husband didn't stop it. He joined in. In that single moment, a flood of memories crashed into her mind. The late nights she supported him through his early career struggles, the sacrifices she made so he could attend business trips, the events she hosted for his colleagues to help him climb the ladder. She wasn't a guest in this world. She helped build his place in it. And now, he was mocking her in the very circle she helped him reach. Her heart was pounding, but her face stayed calm. She scanned the room, and her eyes landed on the CEO, a tall, silver-haired man surrounded by board members. He was someone she had met briefly a few times, always polite, always observant. And then, like a sudden click, she remembered something. A piece of information. A conversation she had overheard months ago, late at night, when her husband thought she was asleep. Something about the boss. Something the CEO would absolutely want to know. The idea formed like a spark. Not revenge out of rage, but a quiet, calculated shift in the room's power dynamics. She didn't storm out. She didn't cry. She simply excused herself from the group with a serene smile, gliding through the crowd with the grace of someone who had nothing to prove. Her husband barely noticed her leave. He was too busy laughing with the boss and their entourage. She approached the CEO's circle with effortless poise. The board members fell silent as she came closer. She had that presence, the kind that didn't demand attention but naturally commanded it. The CEO turned to her, surprised but pleased. "Ah, Mrs. Turner," he said, offering a warm handshake. "Enjoying the evening?" She leaned in slightly, enough to keep the conversation private, but without breaking the elegance of the moment. Actually, she said softly, I wanted to mention something. It's delicate, but it concerns Mr. Whitman. She tilted her head subtly toward her husband's boss. The CEO's eyes narrowed with interest. Go on. She lowered her voice, whispering a single, carefully crafted sentence into his ear. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a truth he couldn't ignore, a piece of information that directly threatened his trust in his top executive. The CEO froze for half a second. Then his expression changed, just slightly, the kind of shift only a few people would notice. But she noticed. He straightened up, nodded slowly, and said, "Thank you. That was insightful." He then turned to his board members with a completely different energy. Within moments, he excused himself and began moving toward her husband and his boss. She didn't follow him immediately. She stepped back to the edge of the room, calmly picking up a glass of sparkling water, watching from a distance. Her heartbeat was steady now. She wasn't humiliated anymore. She was in control. As the CEO approached her husband and the boss, she saw the boss's confident expression falter. The CEO leaned in, said something sharp and controlled. The laughter around them faded. Her husband's face shifted from amusement to confusion. The boss looked as if someone had yanked the floor out from under him. Guests began noticing the sudden change in energy at the center of the room. She stood there, her posture impeccable, as if she had no idea what was happening. But inside, she knew exactly what she had set in motion. The whisper wasn't revenge. It was justice delivered in the most elegant way possible, quiet, precise, devastating. The ripple effect of her whisper spread through the ballroom like an invisible wave. It started subtly. Glances exchanged between board members, the sudden hush around the CEO's group, and the way conversations slowed down near the center of the hall. The boss, once loud and commanding, now stood rigid, his forced smile betraying the tension tightening around his jaw. Her husband noticed the change, but didn't fully understand what was unfolding. He tried to keep the conversation light, throwing out jokes that no one laughed at anymore. The CEO's demeanor shifted entirely. Moments ago, he had been a gracious host. Now he carried the energy of a man who had just uncovered something dangerous lurking within his ranks. He gestured for a senior board member to join him, whispered a few words, and then both turned their focus back to the boss. It was a quiet but unmistakable shift of authority. The boss's laughter died completely. She observed it all from across the room with an unreadable expression, her glass resting delicately in her hand. She didn't need to be in the center anymore. The storm she had initiated was already moving on its own. She caught her husband's eyes briefly. His once confident smile flickered with confusion. He tilted his head as if silently asking, "What did you do?" She offered him nothing but a calm, almost serene gaze. A few minutes later, the CEO requested everyone's attention for an unscheduled announcement. The ballroom quieted instantly. All eyes turned to the stage as he stepped up to the microphone. His tone was measured, but beneath it was an unmistakable sharpness. "Before we proceed with the evening, I want to take a moment to address something important," he began. "Integrity is the foundation of everything we build here. Without it, the entire structure collapses. Tonight, certain matters have come to my attention that require immediate action. And let me assure you, they will be handled with the seriousness they deserve." The room fell into a tense silence. Her husband's boss shifted uncomfortably, his collar suddenly feeling tighter. People glanced at each other, whispering speculations. Her husband's forehead furrowed, his earlier arrogance replaced by a quiet sense of dread. The CEO didn't reveal details. He didn't need to. The tone of his voice was enough to signal that someone's power was about to crumble. After the announcement, small groups began to form around the ballroom, whispering in corners, exchanging theories. The boss's allies approached him cautiously, offering forced smiles and quick exits. The once magnetic circle around him dissolved. Her husband clung to his boss's side like a lifeline, unaware that the man he admired was now standing on a collapsing bridge. She took her time finishing her drink, allowing the tension to build naturally. Then, with graceful precision, she approached her husband. He turned toward her, his smile awkward, his voice a bit too bright. "What did you say to him?" he asked, lowering his tone to a whisper. "I saw you talking to the CEO. What was that about?" She looked at him steadily. "Just a conversation," she replied softly. "A meaningful one." His expression hardened. "You're playing games," he hissed under his breath. "You don't understand how dangerous this is. If something happens to Whitman, it affects my entire career." She tilted her head slightly, a trace of amusement in her eyes. "Perhaps you should have thought about your career before laughing at me in front of everyone." He froze. The weight of her words landed like a silent blow. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The calmness in her tone carried more power than anger ever could. Moments later, one of the board members approached her politely. "Mrs. Turner, the CEO would like a word with you in private." She followed him through a side hallway to a quieter lounge. The CEO stood waiting, hands clasped behind his back. His expression was serious but respectful. "First," he said, "I want to thank you for bringing this matter to my attention. What you told me tonight confirms something we've suspected for a while, but we lacked a credible source. You've provided exactly that. I assure you, this will be handled at the highest level." She nodded gracefully. "I only told you what needed to be told. What happens after isn't in my hands." The CEO gave a slight, approving smile. "You've done the right thing. And for what it's worth, you handled yourself tonight with remarkable composure. That kind of strength doesn't go unnoticed." As she returned to the ballroom, she noticed the shift in how people looked at her. Earlier, she had been just the wife, the quiet figure on her husband's arm. Now, whispers followed her in a different tone. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with newfound respect. Power wasn't loud. It didn't need to announce itself. It simply changed the air around a person. Her husband approached her again, this time more agitated. "What have you done?" he demanded in a low voice. "Do you realize this could ruin everything for us?" She met his gaze calmly. "No," she replied. "This could ruin everything for him. And maybe for you if you keep choosing to stand on the wrong side." He tried to laugh it off, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. "You're bluffing. You think a whisper changes everything? Whitman is untouchable. He's been running this company for years." She leaned closer, her words barely audible. "Every king thinks his throne is untouchable until someone pulls the right thread." His face paled slightly. For the first time, he wasn't looking at her as a trophy wife. He was looking at her as someone he didn't fully understand anymore. Someone who wasn't beneath him, but beside, or perhaps above him. An hour later, the CEO and a few senior executives left the gala abruptly, taking Whitman with them. It wasn't a public scene, but the silence that followed their exit said more than any announcement could. People started to realize something seismic had happened behind those elegant walls. As the night wound down, she stood near the exit, watching guests leave in clusters, buzzing with theories. Her husband stood a few feet away, isolated, his earlier bravado completely gone. The man who had laughed at her so openly now looked like he was waiting for a verdict. And in a way, he was. She didn't speak to him on the drive home. She didn't need to. The silence was heavier than any argument could have been. He kept glancing at her, as if searching for the woman he thought he could humiliate without consequence. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She had reminded him, and everyone else, exactly who she was, without raising her voice, without begging for respect. The next morning would bring headlines, meetings, and consequences that would shake their world. But for now, as the car drove through the quiet streets, she rested her head back and closed her eyes. The night had begun with humiliation. It ended with power shifted, silently, irrevocably.